Hello and welcome to History Stuff. More history stuff. Yay! You're all excited and pleased. This is the second episode of my revived YouTube channel, in which I talk about events in British and Irish medieval history. Pretty broad theme there, lots to talk about. And today I want to talk just a little bit about a very important battle in Wales in the late 11th century, which is pretty obscure outside of Wales, and so far as I can see, not mentioned very often within Wales either. It's if not quite forgotten, it's not as famous as many other battles, which I think is a shame, because the history of it and the context is very rich. There's lots going on and lots to talk about. So this is the Battle of Brycheiniog in Brecon in South Wales in April 1093. Probably fought between the 17th and the 23rd of April, so I'm a bit early, but never mind. And I want to read out some of the contemporary Welsh and English accounts of this battle and contrast and compare them, and then try to make a point about the importance of context versus hindsight when talking about history, especially ancient history, things that happened a long time ago. So the first account I've got in front of me, pardon me while I'm looking down because I'm reading off the page, is from an English chronicle. This is very brief, matter of fact. It just says, King Rhys of the Welsh in Easter week, near to the castle called Brycheiniog, was killed in battle. And from that day forth, kings ceased to rule in Wales. So the English chronicler has made this very glib little note in his chronicle that Rhys of the Welsh, and this is Rhys ap Tewdwr, King of Deheubarth in South Wales, which is one of the three big Welsh kingdoms. Deheubarth takes up much of South Wales going into the west. Rhys is the local king, and he's killed in battle near to one of the castles in Brycheiniog. There's many castles. We don't know quite for certain where this battle took place. And then the chronicler ends on this very dramatic flourish. He says that from that day forth, kings ceased to rule in Wales. That's it, no more kings. Well, he was very wrong about that, but that was obviously his impression. So moving on to some of the Welsh accounts, these are taken from the Annales Cambriae, the Annals of Wales, compilation of Welsh chronicles written up in the medieval era. The first one reads, Rhys ap Tewdwr, the ruler of Deheubarth, was killed by the French for Brycheiniog, after whose death Cadwgan ap Bleddyn laid waste Dyfed on the first day of April. About 1st of July, the French came to Dyfed and Ceredigion for the first time and possessed them and established castles in them, and from them they occupied all the land of the Welsh. So more detail there. The Welsh chronicler tells us that Rhys was killed by the French, the Normans that is, who have conquered England a couple of decades previously, 1066 and all that, and they're now coming into Wales. And it says that after Rhys's death at the hands of the French, the Normans, his land of Dyfed was attacked and plundered by another Welsh ruler, Cadwgan ap Bleddyn, on the last day of April, which would be a few days after the battle. So Cadwgan, a fellow Welsh ruler, seems to have exploited the defeat of Rhys to attack some of his lands. And then it says about 1st of July, a few weeks later, the French, the Normans, they came to Dyfed and Ceredigion for the first time. This is the first time they've really invaded these parts of Wales in force, again exploiting the defeat of poor old Rhys, taking control of them and established castles in them. And these would have been the famous Motte and Bailey castles that were all over England by this point, before they were consolidated in stone. And from them they occupied all the land of the Welsh. Well, again, that's a bit of an overstatement, because Brycheiniog and Dyfed and Ceredigion, while they form quite a significant chunk of Wales, they're not all the land of the Welsh by any means. And then you have two more accounts from the Annales Cambriae, which are very similar, really. So I won't bother reading out those. But then we have another Norman account, or English account, by a monk, a Mercian monk called Orderic, one of the main chroniclers of this era. And he gives us the actual name of Rhys's opponent at this battle, who is a Norman baron named Bernard Neufmarche. And Orderic tells us in this particular translation I've got in front of me, Bernard Nof Marsh fought in the wars under 3 kings of England with great bravery. In the time of William Rufus, he fought a battle with King Rhys of Wales, and having slain him, built the castle of Brycheiniog and possessed the kingdom of the Welsh, of which Talgarth was the capital for many years. He also built a church in honour of St. John the Evangelist in his town of Brycheiniog, and settling monks there, endowed them with the tithes of all his possessions. So Orderic has quite usefully given us some more details there of what happened in this battle in April 1093. Bernard Nof Marsh, who from the sounds of it was a very experienced Norman soldier, adventurer, he comes into this part of Wales during the reign of William Rufus, and having fought a battle with Rhys and killed him. So this makes it clear that this is an engagement, it's a pitched battle. Rhys wasn't just randomly murdered. Kills Rhys and then follows up by building the castle of Brycheiniog, and seizing control of Talgarth, which is apparently was the capital of the region. He then builds a church in the town of Brycheiniog, settles a community of monks there, and gives them all the things they need to flourish. So that's another Norman account, more detail. And then I want to quote one final chronicle, and this is a totally different source, quite a surprising one perhaps. It is from the Annals of Innisfallen, or Farlan, which is a chronicler based in southwest Ireland over the Irish Sea. Very brief, but contains a very interesting detail. It translates as Rhys ap Tewdwr, King of Wales, and Thorkill ab Eola were slain by the French. So from this it appears that Rhys had an ally who, from his name and the context of the Irish Chronicle, Southwest Ireland, would be an Irish Viking, Thorkill ab Eola, or I suppose we might call him Hiberno-Norse, or something like that. Which Thorkill, I should imagine, because the local chronicle mentions his name, came from the district around Innisfallen, which is a Kerry in Ireland, and probably brought a contingent of his men with him, Irish Vikings. So this would imply that Rhys had a band of Irish Vikings in his army, which casts an interesting light. As I said, this is actually quite a rich subject with more than one sort of layer to it. It's one of those battles which could very easily be perceived as a straightforward encounter between the Welsh on the one hand, men in red hats, the Normans on the other, who, while they've conquered England, they're by no means English at this early stage. They're still very much foreign occupiers who speak French. Culturally, they're French, and they certainly wouldn't be wearing white England rugby shirts with red roses on. If anything, they'd be blue French shirts. But of course, the Normans themselves are a type of Viking. Really, they're Frenchified Vikings, as you know, many of us will know. They were descended from Vikings who settled in Normandy, in that part of France. And they're not too many generations removed by this point from their Viking forebears. And they're certainly, you know, it's the same mindset, whether they're speaking French or not and wearing slightly different hats. It's still the Viking way: plundering, raiding, grabbing someone else's land, taking it for yourself. So this could arguably, depending on how you want to flip these identity cards, it could be depicted in an entirely different way as a battle between a Welsh Irish Viking army on the one hand against a bunch of other Vikings on the other hand, albeit, you know, they're now a bit French, which you know, when we talk, especially in Wales, it's probably the same in England and Scotland and anywhere else really, when we talk about these ancient conflicts, these old medieval wars, they do tend to get synthesized through this sort of prism of modern nationalism and national boundaries and identities. Um, I mean, it's not wrong, obviously, to say, you know, to interpret it in that light. I mean, Rhys ap Tewdwr, he was defending his land, his homeland, which his ancestors had held for centuries, against a foreign invader. That's quite correct. But at the same time, the Normans, as I said, they're not English. They've just conquered England. The English in this era are basically a conquered and enslaved people, apart from those who've decided to up sticks and go and live elsewhere, go and live in the Eastern Empire or Constantinople and places like that. And you can't blame them, really. Life under the Normans wasn't much fun. And then in terms of, you know, in ethnic terms, of if you want to talk about race and identity in that context, well, Rhys apparently had some Irish Vikings with him. Why? We don't know. Possibly they were mercenaries he hired in very quickly to help him repel the Normans. But that was the situation. And then, of course, you've got this chap, Cadogan ap Bledin, who apparently exploited the defeat and death of Rhys to attack his lands, which were presumably now stripped of defenders because they've all been killed fighting the Normans. And he, in early May, this chap, he brings his war band into play. He invades Dyfed and plunders it, ravages it from end to end, probably kills lots of Welsh peasants. And he does this in the window of time between the Battle of Brycheiniog and the second coming of the Normans, who come to occupy, not just to win a battle, they come to throw up castles, and they're here to stay. So Cadogan exploits this narrow window of time to try and grab what he can. And who is he? Well, he was actually king of Powys. He was King Cadogan ap Bledin of Powys. And this is you know, quite sort of common for the era. The dynasties of Wales, especially the major dynasties of Deheubarth, Powys, and Gwynedd, they're forever fighting each other. They fight the Normans, of course, and sometimes they're allied with the Normans, or the kings of England. Sometimes they're opposed to them. But it's a very fractured, complex picture. And for me, that is what makes the subject interesting. It's not straightforward. It's not a black and white story of A versus B, because if you do that, if you define it in those very simple terms, then you have to forget about C, D, Z, X, and Y, who were also there. And at that point, you're not really being very honest. You're not giving the complete picture, and you're trying to shape history and to make it, force it into a pattern that is more pleasing to you, and filter out the awkward bits and reduce it to a soundbite. And I think, you know, most of us with any sort of knowledge and of how the world works, and how nasty human beings can be, will know what that's all about. Sound bites, history, bite-sized chunks, you know, have this bit, swallow that like a drug, let it influence you, encourage your prejudices and your hatreds, and just forget about the rest, because we don't want you to think about that. And I think the most important thing we can do is think for ourselves. And anyone who tries to sort of go against that and force their own narrative on the world and on people is doing a very wicked thing, whatever their politics. I don't care. I don't care where they're coming from. If they're doing that, then it's just wrong, in my view. That's my opinion anyway. You may disagree, and that's fine too. Right, so that's my shortish video about the Battle of Brycheiniog and the fate of Rhys ap Tewdwr, poor guy. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.